Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to cross the Øresund once again, and we're going to go back to Sjælland in Denmark and revisit a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. Now, I've had some really nice beers from these guys so far, mainly IPAs, and I think that's what this brewery seems to specialise in, is different kinds of IPAs. But the one that we're going to try today is a type of IPA that I've not had from these guys before. So I'm hoping that it carries on in the same vein as the other ones, and I'm hoping it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. I'm certainly very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to Copenhagen, the Danish capital, on the eastern side of Sjælland. We're going to go to Amager in the southern part of the city, and we're going to have a look at my fifth beer from Caleidoskope Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Blue Specks. It comes in at 7% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA. So yeah, this is my first West Coast IPA from these guys, which I thought was quite cool. All of the four other ones have been New England's, but I actually bought this beer in Peder's Ølbar, which is also attached to this company. But I went in there hoping to film a few kind of tastings and a bit of an out and about video and things like that, because I know this bar is associated with them. But yeah, unfortunately when I was there, they had lots of different American things on tap because they just got out of a tap takeover. So yeah, no Kaleidoscope stuff on tap, unfortunately. But what I did do was buy this can and brought it home for a sit-down review, and definitely cool to do my first West Coast IPA from these guys as well. It's nice to see that the West Coasters are getting a little bit more attention again in recent times after the haze craze has died down a little bit. But yeah, as I said, looking forward to this one, so let's get cracking with it and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Caleidoskope Brewing Company before, and there will no doubt be more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers I've reviewed for you, and that's added to very regularly, of course, because I live in the very south of Sweden and it's easy enough to get over the water to Copenhagen and pick up all of these beers, and I love my Danish beers. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Caleidoskope Brewing Company. So Caleidoskope Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Copenhagen, and basically this is the beer brewing project of the owners of the Peder's Bar, which you'll find in central Copenhagen. But the four men behind the company are Jonas Kobero, Rasmus Rosquist, Anders Ising, and Brian Madsen. And these guys opened the Peder's Bar together back in December of 2016, which is known as a good beer bar. But the brewery can be found near Klovemarken in Amager in the south of the city, and in the brewery they currently have a 500-litre brewhouse with 2,000 litres of fermentation capacity. But Anders and Brian are the two brewers, and Anders actually studied it at the Scandinavian Brewing School, which has given birth to many very talented brewers, including the guys at Amager Brewhus itself. But as of September 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have released about 45 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and the name Kaleidoscope is used basically because they say they're playing around with combinations of ingredients and things like that in the same way that a kaleidoscope plays around with light, and they just changed the C and the K around for fun. So yeah, it begins with C, and the C in the middle of the word is changed for a K, as you can see from the video title. But yeah, as I said, these guys are relative newcomers to the Danish craft beer scene, but I can see these guys doing well going forward. Their beers so far have been pretty damn nice actually. And as I said, this is my first go at a West Coast IPA from these guys. I'm not sure if they've done any of these before or if this is the first one they've released, but it was canned very recently. In fact, this is a very new beer. So I'm reviewing this one for you on the 22nd of September 2021, and I saw on Facebook that it was canned on the in about the same date in August actually. So this is only about a month old, this one. So yeah, that's it. That's all I can really tell you about Caleidoskope Brewing Company for the moment. I'm sure in years to come we will have more to add to my notes for this brewery. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done, and there will be more to come because they are pretty prolific. So yeah, that's it for your history section. Let's get on and have a little look at this beer itself. So as you can see, this one is 440ml can. I actually can't remember how much I paid for this one because I did sit down and drink 2 Pilsners in Pedro's Bar when I was there and just got this one to take away. So yeah, it was pretty cool to come across this one, my first West Coast IPA from these guys. I remember the first beer I had from these guys was the Purple Amalgam, then we had the Orange Dots, which were 2 of the first beers that they did, and I forget what the other 2 after that were called. They had more kind of like Spectrum-y type names and stuff like this. So a lot of their beers, because of the whole light theme that they have, are named, you know, different colours and different shapes and stuff like this actually. So yeah, but nicely presented. This one, 440ml can. As I said to you, this one is a 7% West Coast IPA, but unusually on the Untappd page, they didn't actually have the malt base or the hops listed, which they usually do for their beers. So yeah, not sure exactly what's in this one, but we can certainly open it up and find out. But just to let you have a little look at this, you can see there is the Caleidoskope Brewing Company symbol, which is pretty cool. Blue Specks, and then you've just got the Danish pant thing on the back. There's not a blurb or anything like this. But yeah, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So let's get it out and into the glass. Blue Specks West Coast IPA from Caleidoskope Brewing Company in Amager, southern Copenhagen. So there we are. Tell you something, it certainly looks the part of a West Coast IPA. We've still got a little bit of it left in the bottom there, but I think that should be all right for just now. So yeah, look at the pour on that. That looks absolutely lovely. Look at the head on this. Just checking that the camera is zooming in and showing you that. It looks awesome, I have to say. Yeah, the head on that is beautiful. So before it disappears, this beer has poured, I think we've got about 80% of it in the glass right enough. This beer is poured with a 3/4 finger of a frothy, I would say creamy coloured head. I wouldn't describe that as perfect white, although it does look perfect white on the side, so maybe it's just the light deceiving me a little bit. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful head on this beer. If we shine the light through it, I would describe the colour of this one as being a kind of medium to rich amber, actually. So it looks absolutely great, and you can see that the beer does have a degree of that sort of natural haze to it, which I think looks absolutely great. Let me just put up the light setting one more. I think that's a bit better. Yes, so this beer looks absolutely awesome. So lovely kind of rich amber colour. They're almost blood orange actually, but I think it's maybe appearing a little bit lighter to you guys. Maybe I put the light up a bit too much, but whatever. So yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and overall it does look very nice. But as I say, rich amber blood orange colour, this one. So remember, these beers, the colour depends on 1, the type of malts that you're going to use. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role in that, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. So yeah, that all goes together. But yeah, I think it really it works really nicely, this one. But usually a West Coast IPA like this is going to have a wort boil of around 90 minutes. That's fairly standard, and they will have a little bit of kind of brown sugary orientated malt in them, and that's why you get these richer, more amber colours with these ones compared to the brighter yellows and things you'll get with the New Englands. And these ones tend to be, most of the time they'll tend to be all barley malt beers as well, rather than having oats and wheat and things in them. It's not unheard of to have a bit of oats and wheat in a West Coast IPA, but yeah, most of the time these ones tend to be all barley malt grain. But lovely looking beer, this one. I'm curious to see how it turns out. Not much more to say about the appearance of it, so let's have a look at the aroma and see how we go with that then. That smells good, and it smells pretty damn fresh as well. and it's got a good bit of dankness to it as well. So I'm curious to see how this turns out, because as I've said in other West Coast reviews recently, quite a few breweries are taking the bitterness of these, there are quite a few of these breweries are taking the bitterness of the West Coast IPAs down. So you've got this thing called the modern West Coast IPA, which is essentially the low IBU West Coast IPA, which they can be quite nice, but I do miss the big dankness and stuff you get from these, or you used to get from these styles, I should say. But this smells lovely. So first impression of this one is that it does have a bit of that big, deep green component to it, and for me, that's one of the essences of a West Coast IPA. But there's big, oily, fruity characters in there. It strikes me as being quite balanced between the tropical and more citrusy side of things. Then you've got a nice malt base to this. Now, as I've said in West Coast IPA reviews as well, for me, there's two different directions you can take a West Coast IPA. They can be more kind of oily and caramelly, such as Sierra Nevada Torpedo. That was the first one I tried that was like that. Or they can be a little bit more kind of biscuity and bready, such as Pliny the Elder. That was the first one that I really kind of discovered that with. But yeah, they can be more kind of biscuity and bready. And this one comes across, it kind of comes across somewhere in the middle. There's quite a lot of breadiness to this one. But the other thing you have to remember is that European West Coast IPAs do tend to be a little bit more kind of bready than the American counterparts, in a sense, because in America they'll often use like crystal malts and two-row malts, which I think come across as a bit sweeter and more oily and caramelly and stuff like that, whereas a lot of European breweries will use German malt, which I think is kind of inherently bready. So that's another thing, just in my experience, that I would mention about this. But the West Coast IPAs, just lovely. But the malt base of this one, nice and bready, but it has got a bit of that oily character to it. And at 7%, it's got a decent ABV to it. So I'm curious to see how that translates into the flavour. But let's just break down the aroma for you a bit more and describe it a wee bit more in depth. That's a first impression. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, absolutely. If we start on the malty side of things, you've got a bit of kind of a straight up bread crust in there, a lovely white bready character sitting on top of it as well. Those form the absolute linchpins of the beer. And you know, you maybe get a very slightly woody note out of this one. I do get a little tiny touch of wood out of this beer, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, bread crust, soft white bread in there, very fresh white bread, which I like. So yeah, that comes across nicely. On top of that, there is a fair wee bit of brown sugar, so there's a nice oily caramel for me, and it's quite a straight up caramel, not toasted or overly caramelized or anything like this, so that indicates a kind of normal 90-minute wort boil. But yeah, nice kind of sweet caramel coming out of this one. Certainly a wee touch of booziness, actually. You get a little bit of that kind of booziness to the caramel, which is kind of interesting. That's a common thing that you can often find with West Coast IPAs. And there's also a bit of that kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. But it has everything I would want in the malt base of a West Coast IPA. But as I say, the thing that gives it away as a European brewed West Coast IPA is that big bready smoothness, and I suspect that's from German malt. Could be a little bit of Vienna as well, right enough, or some Czech, who knows. And there are Swedish malteries too, but I think European malt is a bit more bready than American malt, the crystals and the two rows and things that they use over there. But yeah, malty wise, this one smells really nice. On the hoppy side of things then, the green component, for me there is a wee bit of earthiness to this one, but I think that takes a bit of a back seat to the big kind of deep dank floral aromaticity that you get out of the beer. I wouldn't be surprised if this one has something along the lines of, you know, a little bit of Chinook or something in it. I've got a feeling it doesn't seem quite spicy enough to be Columbus, to be honest with you, but I think they're using some of the old school West Coast bittering hops in this, because it does have that big deep dankness and it just feels familiar. So I think there is a how do you say, I think there is an element of as we say, I think there is an element of like Chinook in this. It does come across a little bit more like Chinook, so I wouldn't be surprised at that. So yeah, nice big deep danky notes, almost a little bit pine resiny, but I find it a little bit more rounded and less kind of sharp than pine resiny, if that makes sense. So a deeper, big deep floral aromatic dankness in there. But yeah, can see why people would say pine resin. There is a wee touch of spiciness to it, but as I say, I'm not overly convinced that it's that spicy and that it could be Columbus. We'll be able to try to tell that a little bit more in the flavour, I think. But on the grassy side of things, it does have a nice bright zesty grassy character as well, which I really enjoy. So yeah, it goes together very, very well, this one, and it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard on the green component. Fruity side of things then, as I said earlier, the fruity character on this one is nice and big and oily. So for me, I've got a feeling that this one is something kind of straightforward. I think this might just be a straight up like Citra Mosaic. I think it might be something like that, or maybe a Simcoe Mosaic along with a bit of Chinook behind it. So yeah, you'd certainly get a bit of a stronger grapefruit out of this one. As I say, I do suspect there's a wee bit of Chinook in here as a bittering hop. And remember, West Coast IPAs have more bittering hops in them, early edition hops, than New England's do. The early edition hops during the wort boil are the ones that give you the big bitterness. And as you go through that wort boil, you've got a trade-off from bitterness over to flavour and aroma. And usually it's within the last half hour of the 90 minutes that you get most of the flavour and aroma, and of course with dry hopping as well. But I suspect what's going on with this beer is potentially a bit of Chinook added on in the early stage, but then I think, you know, in the last half hour, I've got a feeling that this could be like Citra and Mosaic. It's something like that. It doesn't strike me as being anything that we haven't had before, actually. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, definitely some nice grapefruit in there. You get a more oily passion fruit out of it as well. I want to say there's a bit of a kind of, I want to say there's a wee bit of a kind of oily, mango-y character to this one as well, but quite a bit of an oily tangerine note dominating. I think the orangey tangerine notes really dominate the kind of character of this one. And I mean, it could be, as I say, I suspect Mosaic, and I can see why they would call it blue Specks in that case, because sometimes Mosaic can give you a wee bit of a kind of blueberry sort of thing. And you get a wee tiny bit of that out of this one, in fairness. You do get a little bit of that. But yeah, nice kind of oily orange tangerine notes in there, as I say, a little bit of that kind of mosaic-y blueberry sort of thing. But you do get a wee bit of a kind of lemony zest, I think, which I suspect is Citra in this one too. But yeah, big oily fruity characters, grapefruit, passion fruit, mango, tangerines, wee bit of blueberry, and a wee bit of a kind of lemony zest kind of mixing in with the grassy sort of things. But lovely, lovely smelling beer, this one. So let's get the rest of it in the glass, and we'll see how we go. I'm just going to put the light setting down once again because I can see it reflecting off the can, and it's just annoying me a little bit. So it doesn't make much of a difference, but anyway, whatever. So yeah, let's get stuck into this beer. This one is the Blue Specks, a West Coast IPA coming in at 7% ABV from Caleidoskope Brewing Company in Amager in southern Copenhagen. Let's go for it with this beer. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Oh, that's nice. Mouthfeel wise, I have to say, the first thing that strikes me about this is the mouthfeel. They've got the old school, oily West Coast mouthfeel, bang on the money. That's the first thing that strikes me about this one. I'm going to say straight away, it doesn't strike me as the most bitter of West Coast IPAs, but they've got the malty side of it right. They've got the mouthfeel, as I say, and the oiliness of the beer. It's just, this is a really good go at a West Coast IPA. Actually, could do with just a wee bit more bitterness, as I say, but like I said, I'm more a fan of the real old school West Coast IPAs than the more kind of modern ones. But yeah, if this is their first West Coast IPA, I think this is pretty damn good actually, so well done to them. First impressions is it's quite a bready leaning West Coast IPA, but there is a fair bit of brown sugar to it as well, oily fruits, and then the green component is a little bit dank, but not as dank as the aroma might have you believe. So yeah, all in all, solid effort from Caleidoskope Brewing. But let's break the flavour down for you as we always do and describe it a bit more in depth. It's very nice. So yeah, middle and back third of your palate then. Straight away across that middle and back third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of this beer is a bit of bread crust, and it actually has a wee bit of a kind of grainy dryness and bitterness to it. You can feel that in the middle of your palate, but on top of that, you have that lovely kind of softer, smooth, white bready character coming out of this one. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what type of malts would be in it, but I do wonder, just from some of the graininess in here, and the fact that I've reviewed a good few Vienna lagers from Vienna itself recently, I do wonder if there could be a little bit of Vienna malt in this one, just from some of the grainy things you get out of this beer. But yeah, you do get a nice little bit of a white bready character in there, then there's a wee bit of a more kind of brown bready character too. So I'd say bread crust, brown bread, white bread, that's the backbone of the beer. That's on the middle third and the back third of your palate with this one. So yeah, that's forming the linchpin of the beer. Let's focus on the middle third of your palate for the next little bit though. Let's focus there. So, in the front half of that middle third of your palate, you've got a nice kind of woody element to the beer, which yeah, you've got a nice kind of woody element to the beer, which is kind of, it just adds a nice little bit of undertone, and it's quite smooth as well, as we say. But yeah, I think this beer does get a wee bit more grainy and things the further back we go, but that woody note that you get out of this one is just very, very subtle. But sitting on top of that kind of brown bready layer that we were talking about, in the middle of your palate, you can feel this kind of circle there, and that's where the brown sugary notes come out of the beer. So it's got a nice toasty brown sugary element just kind of sitting, underneath. Just kind of sitting underneath that, which I do like. But on top of that, you've got a nice kind of boozy, you do have a nice little bit of a kind of boozy caramel coming out of it. And the caramel that you get on this one, it's interesting because in the dead centre of your palate, it's really quite concentrated, which I like. But as you move further out from that, it does become a little bit more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity like, which I very much enjoy. So yes, concentrated brown sugary notes there, a little bit more kind of biscuity and caramelly as you move out from the centre, and then yeah, the biscuity notes kind of carry on out to the edge of that middle third of your palate. So I do like that. I can appreciate how that goes together. So on top of that, as we say, I think there's not much else to say on top of that. What we have, so yeah, bread crust, brown bread, white bread, boozy kind of caramel, a bit of a biscuity note, and I think that's really what lingers in the middle third of your palate with this one. So I like that, and it gets a thumbs up. It does get a thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, I think we can leave it there for the middle third of your palate then. So let's focus on the back third of the palate. Pardon me. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a bit more of a kind of stronger bread crusty element, a bit more grainy. Then at the back, towards the back of that, to the back of your palate, the back third of your palate, on top of those layers that we talked about, we can say there is the more kind of yeasty quality to the beer. So again, base layer, bread crust there, you can feel it's more grainy towards the back of the palate. You can feel there is the white bread on top of there, and then I think the white bread almost comes across as very slightly wheaty. There could well be a little bit of wheat in this one, but it just says barley, hops, yeast and water, so maybe not. It actually had almost a wee bit of a wheaty-like bitiness at the very back of your palate. But on top of that bready note, as we say, there's a more kind of dense yeasty character coming out of this one. So I like how it goes together, absolutely. So on top of the kind of brown, on top of that kind of yeasty note there, there's not a lot else going on in that back third of your palate. But as I always say, the flavour in the back third of your palate is a bit taller, and you can feel that it just condenses down as you come further forward on the palate, and as you go into the middle third of your tongue, the flavours are just a wee bit more kind of condensed together. But as you go further into the aftertaste with this one, you can feel some of the boozy caramel lingering there, and you do get a wee bit more sweetness out of the biscuity note, as well as some kind of grainy elements as well. But yeah, I think it works really nicely, this beer. So it's a big thumbs up from me on the malty side of things. Let's focus on the hoppy part of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, there is definitely a wee bit of earthiness in there, absolutely. And then as you come further forward, it quite quickly changes to be that more kind of deep pine resinous and floral aromatic sort of thing that you expect of the West Coast IPA. So yeah, it does get a wee bit kind of spicy and almost pine needly towards the kind of front corners of the palate. I've got a feeling I'm a bit torn between, I think there's only one bittering hop in this one. I would be very surprised if it's more, but I'm a bit torn onto whether it's Chinook or whether it's Columbus, because it does, when you reach the front corners of the palate, you do get a little bit more of that spiciness you expect to Columbus, but you have got the deep grassiness that you expect, the deep sort of floral pine resiny notes that you would get of Chinook. But I don't get such a big grapefruity note, which is one of the traits of Chinook as well. So I'm not 100% sure in this. Now, the other thing we have to remember too is that if they have just used Citra and Mosaic, these two hops are high alpha acid, they're 14%, and they are capable of giving you a big sort of deep green character like this. So maybe they have just used the same hops in the bittering stage and put a little bit of that in there to give you the background bitterness. That is also a probability, but just the sheer spiciness made me think, you know, maybe there is a wee bit of a a bit of a Chinook or Columbus in there, and that, you know, if they have used that as well, if it is just Mosaic and Citra, I suspect it might be, or I've got a good feeling there is Mosaic in this one, that would explain the earthiness too, because Mosaic would give you that. It's always fun playing Guess the Hops with these beers, which I haven't really done on these videos for a while because there's so many new hops coming out there. You know, you've got Strata, Enigma, Nectaron now as well. It's another new one. So many out there, it's just difficult to keep up, to be honest with you. But yeah, round the front curve of your palate with this beer, you certainly get a little bit of a grassy, kind of zesty character to it, but I wouldn't describe it as being overly zesty. It's actually quite a smooth, but just very slightly zesty, grassy character. But front third of your palate then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up there. A wee bit of a kind of bread crusty note. Then the base of that front third of your palate is more, I'd say there's a wee bit of brown bread in there, but a little bit of a white bready character as well. But on top of that, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, there's a wee touch of grapefruit in the very back of the front third of your palate. Coming forward from that, you get a more slightly oily passion fruity note, and then as you push forward from that, I'm a bit unsure. Maybe I do get maybe a little touch of mango, but I'm starting to wonder, maybe this could be, it could have something like Simcoe or, you know, Idaho 7. Don't think Galaxy. The tropical notes in this just don't strike me as being, they don't strike me as being sort of complex enough to be Citra in some ways, so questioning that actually. But yeah, I do get a wee bit of grapefruit, a wee bit of an oily passion fruit, and maybe just a little touch of mango and apricot coming forward. And these are things that I've picked up from Citra in the past, but Citra's just a little bit more pungent almost, so questioning that. But as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate in this one, I think it's oily tangerines all the way, and I think it's Mosaic. I'm pretty sure there's Mosaic in this, because it gives you that sweet but still quite oily tangerine character. And as you reach the front tip of your palate, you can just feel there's a little touch of lemon limey character in there, and that's one of the things that does make me think Citra. But I think I would stick with that, to be honest. I've got a feeling that this might just be a Citra Mosaic or a Simcoe Mosaic West Coast IPA. I think it's just 2 hops in this one. Don't think it's more than that. Or it could it could have something, as I say, like Chinook and Columbus in there. Always fun to play Guess the Hops with these beers and dissect them a little bit, but whatever it is, it's a really nicely done West Coast IPA, so it gets a thumbs up from me. But let's round off this review with the mouthfeel then. So, mouthfeel wise, kind of top end to mid bodied for me. The carbonation is very, very smooth, and this is a big oily slick beer. It's got a really, really nice mouthfeel for a West Coaster. It's the mouthfeel for me on this beer is spot on actually. In terms of the bitterness, I don't find this one overly bitter. I think this might be sitting somewhere around the kind of 60 IBU mark, and of course these beers back in the day were, you know, sort of 80, 90 IBUs and so on, but I think this one is kind of sitting around the, I think it is sort of sitting at the kind of 60-ish IBU mark, something like that. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness. The malty base has a nice kind of smoothness underneath, as we say, a little bit of grainy character. There is a bit of sweetness and a bit of booziness that comes out of it a wee bit later on, and as we said, a nice kind of oily fruity character, and quite well balanced between the kind of tropical side of things and the more citrusy side, but I think it leans towards that citrusy side the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, it works really well. So yeah, big thumbs up to Caleidoskope Brewing for this one, and if they're going to do more West Coast IPAs, they've got a very solid base to work off when it comes to this one. So I would say to them, stick with the principle of this malt base, because it is very well done, and just play around with the hops. Do some West Coast IPAs with Strata and these new hops that have come out since the West Coast IPA was the thing, if you like. That would be really cool to see. But yeah, impressed with this one. So this was the Blue Specks 7% West Coast IPA from Caleidoskope Brewing Company in Amager in southern Copenhagen. And do make sure you go and check out the Peder's Old Bar as well in central Copenhagen as well. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Caleidoskope Brewing Company as well. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media, the Peder's Old Bar social media as well, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Lovely West Coast IPA this. I think it's very, very well done. So yeah, check out Caleidoskope Brewing Company. Good New England's beers as well. Slàinte, skål, cheers, see you on the next one.